I was standing in my driveway, admiring my brand new propane refill station when Brenda from the HOA pulled up in her pristine white Lexus with a look on her face that could curdle milk. My name is Kane, and I had just spent the last 3 weeks setting up what I thought was a brilliant side business in Pineville, North Carolina. The station was compact, professional, and perfectly legal according to every permit I had obtained from Davidson County. I had done my homework, crossed every T, dotted every I, and even paid for extra insurance coverage that I probably did not need. The whole setup had cost me nearly $15,000, but I figured it would pay for itself within a year given how many people in our area used propane for their grills, RVs, and heating. Brenda stepped out of her car, clipboard already in hand, her heels clicking against the concrete like a countdown timer. She was maybe 50, with that particular haircut that screamed middle management and a designer pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes had that gleam that I had learned to recognize after living in Willow Creek Estates for 2 years. It was the look of someone who lived for finding violations. "Mr. Kane," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "What is this monstrosity you have erected on your property?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over, keeping my tone friendly. "It is a propane refill station. I got all the permits from the county, and I will be operating it as a small business. Pretty exciting, right?" Her expression suggested she found it about as exciting as a root canal. "Did you get HOA approval?" "I checked the CC and Articus," I said, referring to our community's covenants, conditions, and restrictions. "There is nothing in there about home businesses, and certainly nothing about propane refill stations." Brenda flipped through her clipboard with dramatic flair. Section 4.7 clearly states that no commercial enterprise shall be conducted on residential property without prior written approval from the HOA board. I had actually read Section 4.7 about a dozen times. That section specifically refers to businesses that generate customer traffic that would disrupt the residential nature of the neighborhood. I am running this by appointment only, and I will have maybe 3 or 4 customers a day maximum. That is less traffic than Jenny Morrison gets for her Mary Kay parties. "Jenny has approval," Brenda snapped. "Actually, she does not," I said. "I asked her." Brenda's face flushed slightly. "Regardless, this is a safety hazard. You are storing explosive materials in a residential area." "Propane is not explosive, it is flammable, and I am storing it according to NFPA 58 standards. The Davidson County Fire Marshal inspected everything yesterday and gave me full approval. I have the documentation inside if you would like to see it." She straightened her spine. "The HOA board will be hearing about this immediately. I am issuing you a cease and desist notice effective immediately." "On what grounds?" I asked, feeling my patience starting to fray. "On the grounds that you are in violation of our community standards and creating a potential hazard for your neighbors." She pulled a pre-printed form from her clipboard and thrust it at me. "You have 72 hours to remove this structure or face daily fines of $200. I took the paper but did not look at it. "Brenda, I have every legal permit required by the county and state. The HOA does not have the authority to override government permits." "We will see about that," she said, turning on her heel and marching back to her Lexus. I watched her drive away, then looked down at the cease and desist notice. It was dated and signed by Brenda Hopkins, HOA president, and had all the official letterhead and formatting. The problem was, everything on it was nonsense. I had spent weeks researching this business, and I knew my rights. That evening I called my neighbor Marcus, who was a real estate attorney. He came over with a six-pack of beer, and we sat in my garage going through every document I had. "Okay, so you have your business license from the state," Marcus said, ticking items off on his fingers. "You have your Davidson County commercial permit. You have your fire marshal approval. You have your liability insurance. You have your environmental compliance certificate. Derek, you are more legal than most legitimate businesses in this county. So the HOA cannot shut me down." Marcus took a long drink of his beer. "Here is the thing. They can try. They can fine you, they can take you to court, they can make your life miserable. But at the end of the day, when you have proper government permits, the HOA does not have the authority to override them. The courts have been pretty clear on this in North Carolina. HOAs govern aesthetic and community standards, but they cannot prevent legal businesses that have been properly permitted by the authorities with actual jurisdiction. So what do? You document everything. Every interaction with the HOA, every fine they try to levy, every threat they make. And then, if they push it, you sue them for overreach and harassment. You might even get your legal fees paid." I nodded, feeling a bit better. "So I just ignore the cease and desist?" "No. You respond to it formally. You write them a letter explaining that you have all proper government permits, that their authority does not supersede county and state permits, and that you will be continuing to operate your legal business. Be polite but firm. Create a paper trail." The next morning, I sat down at my computer and drafted a response letter. I kept it professional, cited the relevant North Carolina statutes about HOA authority limitations, and included copies of all my permits. I sent it certified mail to both Brenda and the HOA management company, Prestige Community Management. 3 days later, I got a letter back. This time it was not just from Brenda, but from the entire HOA board. The tone had escalated significantly. They were now claiming that my business violated noise ordinances, aesthetic standards, and property value protections. They also stated that the daily fines would begin immediately, and that they were placing a lien on my property for the accumulated amount. I called Marcus again. "They are bluffing," he said after I read him the letter. "They cannot legally place a lien on your property for operating a permitted business. Well, they can file the paperwork, but it would not hold up in court. This is intimidation." "It is working," I admitted. "I am intimidated. Do not be. Here is what you do. Tomorrow morning, go to the Davidson County Permit Office and talk to someone in authority. Get a written statement from them about HOA jurisdiction over permitted businesses. Then you take that statement and you shove it right back down the HOA's throat. Politely, of course." The Davidson County Permit Office was located in Lexington, about a 20-minute drive from my house. I arrived when they opened at 8 in the morning and asked to speak with someone about HOA jurisdiction issues. After a short wait, I was directed to a desk where a tired-looking man in his 60s sat surrounded by filing cabinets and stacks of paper. "I am Bill Hendricks, Senior Permit Officer," he said, shaking my hand. "What can I do for you?" I explained my situation, showing him all my permits and the letters from the HOA. He listened patiently, occasionally nodding or making notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Mr. Kane, you are about the 5th person this month with this exact problem. These HOAs think they run their own little kingdoms, but they do not. When we issue a permit, especially a commercial permit like yours, we are doing so under the authority of county and state law. An HOA is a private organization. They have zero authority to override our permits." "Can you put that in writing?" I asked. "I can do better than that." He turned to his computer and started typing. "I am going to draft you an official letter from this office stating that your permits are valid. that you are in full compliance with all county regulations, and that no private organization has the authority to prevent you from operating your business as permitted. I am also going to include the relevant statutes and case law. You take this to your HOA, and if they continue to harass you, you tell them they can take it up with the county attorney. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the permit office with a 3-page official letter on county letterhead, signed and stamped. I felt like I was carrying a nuclear weapon. That afternoon, I made copies of the letter and hand-delivered one to Brenda's house. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tank top, clearly not expecting visitors. "Mr. Kane," she said coldly. "I have something for you," I said, handing her the letter. "It is from the Davidson County Permit Office. You might want to read it carefully." She took the letter and scanned it quickly, her face growing redder with each paragraph. "This does not change anything. The HOA has the right to maintain community standards. The county disagrees. And if you continue to interfere with my legally permitted business, I will be filing a lawsuit for harassment and seeking damages. The letter explains all of this pretty clearly." "Get off my property," she hissed. I held up my hands. "I am leaving. But I wanted to give you a chance to back down before this gets ugly. I do not want to fight with the HOA, Brenda. I just want to run my business in peace." She slammed the door in my face. The next day, I received an email from Prestige Community Management scheduling an emergency HOA board meeting for that evening. All homeowners were invited to attend. The subject line read, "Important Community Safety Issue." I showed up at the community clubhouse at 7 in the evening to find about 30 of my neighbors already there. The board sat at a table in the front. Brenda, of course, plus 3 other members I vaguely recognized. Dale Richardson, a retired engineer. Pam Morrison, who ran some kind of online boutique. And Todd Brennan, who worked in finance. Brenda called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a presentation about the dangers of propane. She had clearly spent time on this, with PowerPoint slides showing explosions and accidents. She made it sound like I was operating a bomb factory in my backyard. "This is a serious threat to our community," she said gravely. "Mr. Kane may have some permits, but those permits do not protect us from the very real danger he has brought into our neighborhood. Property values are already declining. Several homeowners have expressed concern about their children playing outside." I raised my hand. "Can I respond to this?" "You will have a chance to speak," Brenda said dismissively. She continued for another 10 minutes, painting me as a reckless profiteer who was putting personal gain above community safety. By the time she finished, I could feel the mood in the room turning against me. "Mr. Kane," Brenda said finally, "would you like to address the board?" I stood up and walked to the front, pulling out my folder of documents. "First, I want to clarify some things about propane safety. Propane is not as dangerous as Brenda is suggesting. Yes, it is flammable, but so is the gasoline in every car parked in every driveway in this neighborhood. My station is designed to commercial safety standards, inspected by professionals, and insured for $2 million in liability coverage." I passed around copies of my permits and the letter from the county. "Second, I have every permit required by law. The Davidson County Permit Office has stated in writing that the HOA has no authority to prevent me from operating this business. This is not my opinion. This is the law." Dale Richardson spoke up. "But what about our property values? Having a commercial operation in a residential neighborhood could hurt everyone." "There is no evidence of that," I said. "And frankly, Jenny Morrison runs a Mary Kay business out of her house with regular parties. Bob Jenkins repairs cars in his garage. Half the people in this room work from home in some capacity. The only difference with my business is that Brenda decided she does not like it. This is completely different, Brenda interjected. Those are home-based businesses with minimal impact. You are operating an industrial facility. It is a refill station. I fill propane tanks by appointment. The equipment is quieter than a lawn mower, and I have fewer customers per day than the pizza delivery guy makes stops in this neighborhood. Pam Morrison raised her hand. Can the HOA really not do anything about this? I held up the county letter. According to the Davidson County Permit Office, no, they have no authority here. And if they continue to try to shut down my legal business, I will have grounds to sue for harassment and overreach. The room fell silent. Several people were reading through the copies of the documents I had passed around. Todd Brennan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Brenda, did you consult with our attorney before issuing the cease and desist? I did not think it was necessary, Brenda said stiffly. This is clearly a violation of our community standards. But it is not a violation of any specific rule in our CC and RTCS, Todd said, flipping through a copy of the community bylaws. I have been reading through this, and Section 4.7 is vague at best. And if the county is saying we have no authority, we could be opening the HOA up to serious liability by continuing to push this. Are you suggesting we just give up? Brenda asked, her voice rising. I am suggesting we need to talk to our attorney before we make any more moves, Todd said calmly. The meeting devolved into arguing among the board members. Some neighbors left. Others stayed to watch the show. Eventually, Brenda adjourned the meeting with no resolution, stating that the board would consult with legal counsel and reconvene. I went home feeling cautiously optimistic. 2 weeks passed with no communication from the HOA. My business was doing well. I had regular customers, all of them happy with the convenience and the prices I offered. Nobody complained about noise or traffic. Life was good. Then I came home from grocery shopping one afternoon to find a Davidson County Sheriff's deputy parked in front of my house. My stomach dropped. I parked in my driveway and walked over to his vehicle. He rolled down the window. "Are you Derek Kane?" he asked. "Yes, officer. Is there a problem?" "I have received several complaints about a business operating on this property without proper permits. I need to see your documentation." I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice level. "Of course. Come with me." I brought him into my garage where I had a file cabinet with all my business records. I showed him every permit, every inspection certificate, every piece of paperwork I had. He looked through everything carefully. "This all seems in order," he said finally. "Who has been filing complaints?" "I can give you one guess," he sighed. "Let me guess. Your HOA, the president specifically, Brenda Hopkins." He closed my file folder and handed it back. "Mr. Kane, I want to be clear about something. You are fully legal here. If people keep calling in false complaints about your business, that is harassment, and you have the right to take legal action. The sheriff's office is not going to be used as a tool for HOA disputes." "Thank you, officer. I appreciate you taking the time to verify everything." After he left, I immediately called Marcus. The HOA just weaponized the sheriff's department against me. They filed a false complaint. They reported me for operating without permits, which is complete nonsense. The deputy confirmed I am fully legal. "Okay, that is actually good news for you. That is documented harassment. The deputy filed a report, right?" "I assume so." "Get a copy of that report. Add it to your evidence file. Derek, I think it is time to go on the offense here. These people are not going to stop." Brenda has made this personal. "What do you suggest? We file a lawsuit. Harassment, defamation, and tortious interference with your business. We go after the HOA and Brenda personally. We make this expensive and painful for them, and we make it clear that they do not get to abuse their power. I thought about it for a moment. I really did not want to sue my HOA. I lived here. These were my neighbors, but Marcus was right. This was not going to stop unless I forced it to stop. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Marcus drafted the lawsuit and we filed it in Davidson County Superior Court. We sued the HOA for harassment and tortious interference, and we sued Brenda personally for defamation and abuse of authority. We asked for compensatory damages, punitive damages, and legal fees. The HOA was served with the lawsuit 3 days later. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Brenda called an emergency board meeting without inviting the general membership. According to Todd Brennan, who called me afterward, she went ballistic. She insisted that the HOA fight the lawsuit aggressively and that they countersue me for violating community standards. I voted against her, Todd told me on the phone. So did Dale, but Brenda and Pam outvoted us. They are hiring an attorney and going to war. This is insane, I said. All over a propane refill station. It is not about the propane anymore, Todd said. It is about Brenda refusing to admit she was wrong. She has convinced herself that she is protecting the community, and nothing is going to change her mind. The HOA's attorney was a guy named Richard Paulson from a firm in Charlotte. He sent me a letter demanding that I drop the lawsuit and cease operating my business, or face a vigorous legal defense and countersuits. Marcus read the letter and laughed. This guy is blowing smoke. He knows they have no case. He is trying to intimidate you into backing down. Is it going to work? I asked. That is up to you. But I will tell you this, Derek. We have them dead to rights. We have the county letter. We have the false sheriff complaint. We have documentation of their threats and fines. Any judge is going to see this for what it is. Abuse of HOA authority. Let's keep going. The discovery phase of the lawsuit was revealing. Through subpoenas, we obtained all of the HOA's internal communications about my business. What we found was damning. Brenda had sent dozens of emails to other board members making wild claims about my business. She had called it a cancer on the community and suggested that I was probably violating numerous laws even if I had some permits. She had encouraged other homeowners to file complaints with every government agency she could think of, hoping something would stick. Most disturbingly, we found emails where she had discussed ways to make life difficult for me. She had suggested parking violations, noise complaints, and even having my business inspected repeatedly until they found something wrong. Marcus was delighted. This is gold. This shows malicious intent. This is not an HOA trying to enforce reasonable rules. This is a personal vendetta. The case was scheduled for a hearing in front of Judge Lawrence Mitchell in Davidson County Superior Court. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in late May, about 4 months after I had first installed my propane station. The courtroom was small but official, with dark wood paneling and rows of seats for observers. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Marcus. Across the aisle, Brenda sat with Richard Paulson and another attorney from his firm. She looked confident, even smug. Judge Mitchell was a black man in his mid-60s with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He had a reputation as a no-nonsense judge who did not tolerate games. This is a motion for summary judgment filed by the plaintiff, Judge Mitchell began. Mr. Adams, you represent Mr. Kane. Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor. We are asking the court to rule in our favor as a matter of law. The facts are not in dispute. Mr. Kane obtained all proper permits from Davidson County to operate his propane refill business. The HOA, led by Ms. Hopkins, has engaged in a campaign of harassment to shut down his legal business, despite having no legal authority to do so. Mr. Paulson, the judge said. Richard Paulson stood, adjusting his expensive suit. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of an HOA enforcing its governing documents. Mr. Kane violated the community's CC and Articus by operating a commercial business without approval. The HOA has every right to enforce its rules. Judge Mitchell looked at him over his glasses. Did Mr. Kane obtain proper permits from the county? He did, but that does not override the HOA's authority within its community. Actually, Counselor, in North Carolina, it does. The judge picked up a document from his desk. I have here a letter from the Davidson County Permit Office stating explicitly that the HOA has no authority to prevent Mr. Kane from operating his legally permitted business. Are you arguing that an HOA can override county and state law? Paulson shifted uncomfortably. We are arguing that the HOA has the right to regulate activities within its community according to its governing documents. Show me where in the CC and Articus it prohibits Mr. Kane's specific business, the judge said. Section 4.7 prohibits commercial enterprises. It prohibits commercial enterprises that disrupt the residential nature of the neighborhood. Mr. Kane operates by appointment with minimal traffic. That is hardly disruptive. What else do you have? Paulson flipped through his notes. Your Honor, this is a safety issue. Propane is a hazardous material. Did the fire marshal approve Mr. Kane's setup? Yes, but so the fire marshal, who is the actual authority on safety issues, says it is safe. But the HOA president knows better. We have concerns about property values. Judge Mitchell removed his glasses and stared at Paulson. Counselor, I am going to be very clear with you. I have reviewed all the evidence in this case. I have read the emails from Miss Hopkins. I have seen the documentation of the harassment campaign. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of HOA overreach I have encountered. Your client has no legal basis for their actions, and they have caused Mr. Kane significant distress and expense. He turned to Marcus. Mr. Adams, what damages is your client seeking? Marcus stood again. Your Honor, we are seeking $20,000 in compensatory damages for lost business and emotional distress, $50,000 in punitive damages to deter this kind of behavior, and payment of all legal fees, which currently total $18,000. That seems reasonable given the circumstances. Judge Mitchell looked at Paulson. Does your client wish to make any settlement offer before I rule? Paulson and Brenda huddled together, whispering urgently. After a minute, Paulson stood. We would be willing to agree to cease any interference with Mr. Kane's business. That is not a settlement offer, the judge said. That is what the law already requires you to do. I am asking if you are willing to pay damages. More whispering. Brenda was shaking her head vehemently. No, Your Honor, Paulson said finally. Judge Mitchell nodded. Very well. I am granting summary judgment in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The HOA and Miss Hopkins are jointly and severally liable for $88,000 in damages and legal fees. They are permanently enjoined from interfering with Mr. Kane's business in any way. If they violate this order, Miss Hopkins can be held in contempt of court. Brenda shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. He is putting the entire community at risk. Miss Hopkins, the judge said sternly, I suggest you sit down and be quiet before I add sanctions for disrespecting this court. She sat, her face purple with rage. The judge continued. I want to be very clear about something. HOAs serve a valuable purpose in maintaining communities, but they are not above the law. When a homeowner obtains proper permits from the governmental authorities, an HOA does not have the power to override those permits. Miss Hopkins, you have abused your authority engaged in harassment, and cost your HOA a significant amount of money. I strongly suggest that the board consider whether you should continue in your role as president." He banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." I sat there in shock for a moment, barely able to process what had just happened. Marcus was grinning ear to ear. Across the aisle, Brenda was crying angry tears while Paulson packed up his briefcase with a resigned expression. "We won," Marcus said. "We did not just win. We destroyed them." Outside the courtroom, several of my neighbors who had come to watch were waiting. Todd Brennan shook my hand enthusiastically. "That was amazing," he said. "Derek, I owe you an apology. I should have stood up to Brenda harder from the beginning." "You voted against her," I said. "That took courage." "There is going to be an emergency board meeting tonight," Todd said. "I think Brenda is going to be removed as president. The HOA has to pay $88,000 because of her vendetta. People are furious." That evening, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that the board meeting had been contentious. Brenda had refused to resign, but the other board members had called for a vote of no confidence. She was removed as president by a unanimous vote of the other 3 board members and replaced by Todd Brennan as interim president. The next day, Todd called me. "Derek, on behalf of the HOA, I want to apologize for everything you went through. What Brenda did was wrong, and it never should have happened." "I appreciate that, Todd. I also want you to know that the board is going to pay the judgment without any further fight. We have insurance that will cover most of it, though our premiums are going to go up. And we are going to be amending our CC and Articus to clarify the limits of HOA authority and prevent this kind of thing from happening again." That sounds like a good plan. Also, and I hope this does not sound weird, but if you ever need propane, I've got an RV that needs refilling. I laughed. "I will give you a discount." Over the next few weeks, things settled into a comfortable routine. My business continued to grow. I picked up more customers, including several from outside the neighborhood who had heard about my fight with the HOA and wanted to support me. Brenda moved out of Willow Creek Estates about 2 months after the court judgment. I heard she bought a house in another town. I felt a little bad about that, but not much. She had made her choices. The HOA ended up paying me the full $88,000 as ordered by the court. I used some of it to expand my business, adding a second refill station and hiring a part-time employee. The rest I put into savings. 6 months after the whole ordeal ended, I was working in my garage on a Saturday morning when a car pulled up. A woman in her 40s got out, looking nervous. "Are you Derek Kane?" she asked. "That is me." "What can I do for you?" "My name is Rachel Thompson. I live in a neighborhood in Winston-Salem. I am having almost the exact same problem with my HOA. They are trying to shut down my home bakery business even though I have all my permits. Someone told me about your case and said you might be able to give me some advice." I invited her inside and spent an hour telling her everything I had learned. I gave her Marcus's contact information and copies of the key documents from my case, including the letter from the Davidson County Permit Office. "The most important thing," I told her, "is to document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every fine. And get that letter from your county permit office. That is your nuclear weapon." "Thank you so much," she said, shaking my hand. "You have given me hope." After she left, I thought about how strange the whole experience had been. I had just wanted to start a small business. I had done everything right, followed all the rules, gotten all the permits. And still, I had ended up in a months-long legal battle with my own HOA. But in the end, the system had worked. The courts had recognized HOA overreach for what it was and had put a stop to it. Brenda had faced consequences for her abuse of authority, and I had stood up for my rights, and my phone rang. It was another customer wanting to schedule a propane refill. Kane Propane Services, I answered. How can I help you? Business was good. Life was good. And the HOA finally was leaving me alone. A few months later, I was at a neighborhood barbecue when Todd Brennan pulled me aside. Hey Derek, I wanted to give you an update. We finalized the amendments to the CC and Articus. Oh yeah, what did you change? We added a whole new section, clarifying that the HOA cannot prevent homeowners from operating businesses that are properly permitted by government authorities. We also added language requiring the board to consult with an attorney before taking any enforcement action that could impact a homeowner's livelihood. Basically, we are trying to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. That is great, Todd. I appreciate you guys taking this seriously. We did not have much choice after that judgment, but honestly, it was the right thing to do anyway. Brenda let her personal feelings override common sense, and it cost everyone money and stress. Have you heard from her at all? Todd shook his head. Not a word. I heard she is involved with her new HOA, though. I feel bad for those people, I laughed. Maybe she learned her lesson. Somehow I doubt it, Todd said. People like Brenda do not change. They just find new targets. The barbecue continued, and I found myself surrounded by neighbors who had become genuine friends through the whole ordeal. People who had supported me, who had testified about the lack of disruption from my business, who had stood up at board meetings on my behalf. Marcus showed up later with his family. He grabbed a beer and found me by the grill. How is business? He asked. Honestly, it is booming. I think all the publicity from the lawsuit actually helped. People like supporting a small business owner who stood up to an overbearing HOA. That is the beautiful irony, Marcus said. Brenda tried to destroy your business and she ended up making it more successful. Speaking of which, I have been getting calls from other people in similar situations. That woman from Winston-Salem I told you about, she won her case too. Used our playbook. Good for her. You know, Derek, you kind of started a movement here. There are a lot of people suffering under HOA overreach. Seeing someone actually win gives them hope. I had never thought about it that way, but Marcus was right. In the months since the judgment, I had heard from dozens of people dealing with similar issues. Some had home businesses being targeted. Others were fighting over solar panels, vegetable gardens, or paint colors. All of them were dealing with HOAs that had forgotten their place. That fall, I was contacted by a reporter from the Charlotte Observer who was writing a story about HOA disputes in North Carolina. She interviewed me for over an hour, asking about every detail of my case. The article ran a few weeks later with the headline, "When HOAs Go Too Far, How One Man's Fight Over Propane Became a Landmark Case." It was a fair, well-researched piece that explained both sides of the issue, but ultimately concluded that the courts were increasingly rejecting HOA overreach. The article quoted Judge Mitchell. HOAs serve an important function, but they must remember that they are not sovereign nations. They cannot override state and county law, and they cannot target homeowners who are operating legally permitted businesses. After the article came out, I got calls from 3 different law schools asking if I would be willing to speak to students about property law and HOA disputes. I did 2 of them, driving to Chapel Hill and Durham to share my story with future lawyers. It was strange being seen as some kind of property rights advocate when I had really just been a guy trying to run a propane business. But I understood why it resonated with people. Everyone who lives in an HOA has felt that little tingle of fear when they see an official-looking letter in their mailbox. The fear that someone is going to complain about their mailbox color, or their lawn height, or their choice of patio furniture. My case had shown that there were limits to HOA power, and that homeowners had rights too. By the 1-year anniversary of installing my propane refill station, I had 20 regular customers and was making a decent profit. The business had paid for itself, and then some. I had hired my neighbor's son, a college kid named Jake, to help with refills on weekends. More importantly, I had peace. The HOA was no longer interested in harassing me. Todd was doing a good job as president, focusing on actual community improvements rather than petty enforcement. And I had learned a valuable lesson about standing up for myself. One evening in late November, I was closing up the station when an unfamiliar car pulled into my driveway. A man in his 30s got out, wearing a dress shirt and slacks. "Mr. Kane," he said, approaching with an extended hand. "I am James Parker. I am an attorney in Raleigh." We shook hands. "What can I do for you?" "I represent a group of homeowners who are dealing with similar HOA issues across the state. We have been following your case with interest. I wanted to ask if you would be willing to serve as a plaintiff in a class action lawsuit against several HOAs for systematic overreach and harassment." I was taken aback. "I do not know anything about class action lawsuits." "You would not need to. We would handle all the legal work. But having a plaintiff with your documented history of victory against an HOA would be very valuable. These organizations need to be held accountable when they abuse their authority." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Here is my card. Take your time. Talk it over with your attorney. But I hope you will consider it. You have a chance to help a lot of people." After he left, I sat on my porch with a beer, thinking about his offer. Part of me wanted to be done with HOA drama forever. I had won my case. My business was successful. Why risk getting dragged into more legal battles? But another part of me remembered how helpless I had felt when Brenda first showed up with her cease and desist notice. How scared I had been that I might lose everything I had invested in my business. How the system had seemed rigged against regular homeowners. I called Marcus. "A class action lawsuit," he said after I explained. "That is a big deal. It could take years and be a lot of work, but it could help a lot of people." "It could. And honestly, Derek, you are in a unique position. You have credibility now. You are the guy who beat his HOA. If you are willing to take this on, I will support you however I can. Even if I do not hire you as my attorney for the class action," Marcus laughed. "Even then, though I would appreciate it if you mentioned me to this Parker guy, I could use the business." I thought about it for another week, talking it over with friends and family. In the end, I decided to do it. Not because I wanted more drama or attention, but because I knew there were people out there in my position who did not have the resources or knowledge to fight back. I called James Parker and agreed to be a plaintiff in the class action. The lawsuit was filed in February of the following year. It named 8 different HOAs across North Carolina and alleged a pattern of systematic overreach, harassment, and abuse of authority. The plaintiff class included over 200 homeowners, all with similar stories of HOAs trying to shut down legal businesses, prevent approved home improvements, or levy outrageous fines for minor violations. The case generated significant media attention. I did interviews with local news stations, newspapers, and even a podcast about property rights. Some people thought I was a hero standing up to petty tyrants. Others thought I was an entitled homeowner who wanted to ignore community rules. I did not care much about either characterization. I just wanted HOAs to follow the law and stop abusing their power. The litigation dragged on for over a year. There were motions, depositions, and mountains of discovery. The HOAs fought back hard, arguing that they were being unfairly targeted for trying to maintain their communities. But the evidence was overwhelming. Email after email showing HOA board members discussing ways to target homeowners they did not like, fines levied without proper notice or hearing, selective enforcement of rules based on personal grudges. It was ugly. Finally, in March of the following year, the HOAs agreed to settle. The terms included monetary compensation for the plaintiffs, agreements to reform their governing documents, and mandatory training for all board members about the limits of HOA authority. My portion of the settlement was $45,000, on top of the $88,000 I had already won in my individual case. But more importantly, the settlement included language that would hopefully prevent future homeowners from going through what I had experienced. At the settlement hearing, Judge Mitchell, who had been assigned to oversee the class action, gave a short speech that stuck with me. HOAs were created to maintain property values and create pleasant communities, he said. That is a worthy goal. But somewhere along the way, some HOAs have become instruments of petty tyranny, wielded by individuals who enjoy exercising power over their neighbors. This settlement is a reminder that homeowners have rights, and that those rights must be respected. I hope every HOA in North Carolina is paying attention. After the hearing, I was surrounded by other plaintiffs wanting to shake my hand and thank me. Many of them had stories even worse than mine. One woman had been fined $10,000 for painting her front door the wrong shade of approved green. A man had been threatened with foreclosure for parking his work van in his own driveway. Another had been forbidden from installing a wheelchair ramp for his disabled son. These were not frivolous complaints from entitled homeowners. These were real people being harmed by organizations that had lost sight of their purpose. As I drove home that evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with money or business success. I had stood up to bullies, and I had won. And in the process, I had helped change the legal landscape for HOAs in North Carolina. My propane refill business continued to thrive. Jake, the college kid I had hired, graduated and decided to work for me full-time. We opened a second location in Salisbury and were considering a third in Concord. But the business was never really the point. The point was principle. The point was that in America, you should be able to work hard, follow the rules, and build something without being destroyed by petty bureaucrats drunk on minor authority. 3 years after Brenda first pulled into my driveway with her clipboard and her indignation, I was sitting in my backyard with a group of friends, grilling steaks on my propane-powered grill, of course. Marcus was there, along with Todd Brennan and several other neighbors. "You know what I have been thinking about," Marcus said, beer in hand. "How different things would be if you had just given up when Brenda first told you to shut down your business." "I did consider it," I admitted. "It would have been easier. But you would have lost your investment, and Brenda would have learned that she could bully anyone she wanted. Instead, you stood your ground, and you changed the law for everyone." Todd raised his beer. "To Derek Kane, the man who told his HOA to go to hell and made it stick." Everyone laughed and raised their drinks. "I will drink to that," I said. As the evening wore on and my friends told stories and jokes, I reflected on how much had changed since that day Brenda first appeared. My business was successful. I had new friends and a sense of community that had been forged through adversity. And I had learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing. Standing up to the HOA had cost me time, money, and stress, but it had been worth it. Not just for me, but for all the people who would come after me, who would benefit from the legal precedents we had set and the reforms we had forced. The propane refill station hummed quietly in my driveway, a monument to the idea that in America, you still have the right to pursue your dreams as long as you follow the law. No HOA, no matter how powerful they think they are, can take that away. And if they try, well, the courts are there to remind them who really has authority.